before we start, I would just like to say that some of our content may be triggering for some of our listeners and viewers. If you need help, please see your GP or check out our show notes for a list of support services. While advice is given during these podcasts, this is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice. Neither the host nor the guests of this podcast may be held responsible for any action or claims in any way resulting from the information provided.
Hello and welcome to the Tough Mothers podcast and Tough Mothers TV. Today I'm honoured to be speaking with the amazing mother and coach Linda Anderson about the transition women go through when we become mothers. This is known as matrescence, and I first delved into this in episode 4. Linda and I met through our mutual passion of talking about and researching everything regarding the transition into motherhood. Professionally, we both support mothers during this often tumultuous time because we both know firsthand the challenges matrescence can bring. Linda is a mum of 3 and has been coaching since 2005. However, when she found herself in the midst of matrescence, she started focusing exclusively on coaching mothers. Because she realised there is a total lack of support and honest conversation available to women about the changes we experience within ourselves as a woman when we become a mother. This interview is full of passion, and it's a conversation all mothers so desperately need to have. I hope this episode prompts you to start your conversation. Hi Linda, thank you so much for joining us on the Tough Mothers podcast and Tough Mothers TV. I feel really honoured to have you here because we've had a few chats about, your journey in motherhood and what has brought you to where you are in your coaching career. And I would just love for you to share a little bit with our listeners and our viewers about what brought you to where you are now.
Okay, that's a good question. Thank you. So I've been a life coach for a long time. I feel very old saying this, for about 15 years. So I was a life coach before I was a mother. I have 3 daughters and my eldest is 12. And so when I became a mother, I, went through a whole lot of really deep personal change and challenges, and I found it really confronting, right? I found it very confronting that I had desperately wanted to be a mother since I was a child. It was part of what I felt was my calling. And yet here I was with this much wanted and much loved baby, and I was having all this internal struggle and conflict about losing myself was kind of my big thing about where had I gone, who was I now, why did nobody see me for who I was anymore, all that stuff. And I thought it was just me, right? I just thought something was wrong with me. I thought that, how could this be? How could I have this conflict? And then as I went on my journey of motherhood, I realized that no, actually it wasn't just me, and that many, many, many women have this experience and other experiences, but nobody was talking about it. Nobody was offering support. Nobody was speaking truthfully to each other about what they were really going through. And that made me really quite angry and upset. I was kind of like, why are we all doing this? And so I decided to take my coaching expertise and create spaces for women, for mothers, to come and have a safe exploration of what they were going through, what their experience was, the things that they didn't feel brave enough to say to their friends or their husband or in their mother's group, and to offer them that opportunity to speak their truth and know that it would be safe and honoured and they weren't going to be judged. And so that's kind of how it began. And then that was probably 9 years ago. And I've just, I've continued now to sort of dedicate my professional calling, so to speak, to, to supporting mothers through this space.
It's fantastic. And it's so needed. I mean, I went through a similar thing when I had my child, and I would almost argue that every woman goes through it to some extent, whether it's, as full on as your experience and mine, or whether it's more of a, what's going on here, curiosity. Yeah. I think, the transition into motherhood is a huge thing, and that's why we're talking about it today, because it needs to be spoken about, and we need to share it with other mothers, because in particular, I think women that haven't had their babies yet, that they can be prepared for it.
Yeah. Yeah. We need to begin to normalize it in the conversations we have about motherhood, whether it be before you've had the baby, when you've had the baby, 2 years after you've had the baby, that this just becomes part of our dialogue. And, you know, you and I have talked about this, that one of my greatest wishes is that women stop feeling blindsided by the transition, because we all know it's coming, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
let's make
absolutely.
this normal.
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing for me working with my clients as well is that while the transition is massive when you become a mother, it's ongoing and you
Mm-hmm.
change all the way through motherhood. And I've just had a couple of clients recently who are a little bit older and their children are grown up and they're grandparents actually,
Mm-hmm.
grandmothers who are again going through this now. Who am I now? You know, that
Yep.
my children have got their own lives and it's
Mm.
really interesting. And it's just like you said, makes me angry that we don't talk about it. It's almost like
Yeah.
the world is letting us down, that we don't
Yep. Yep.
experience, that we don't speak about this massive experience.
Yeah. And I think it's a really good point you're making, is that, you know, this transition is not finite. It's not like, well, it's the first 3 months of your baby's life, or when you get to their first baby, you've got through it. It's like, no, it is this constantly evolving experience within us that continues to change, because the people we relate to, i.e. our children, they continue to evolve and change. And so we go on this sort of, I don't know, morphic journey together, that, yeah, it doesn't stop. So, if you're someone that's got teenagers and you are still feeling all these feels about who am I now and da, 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 it's like, yeah, that's part of it.
Yeah, it's really very normal. And I think we need to normalize it. I think you said that at the
Mm,
beginning, because we we know about childbirth. We get a lot of information about what happens.
mm,
I think some of the things we don't talk about that much, which is why I wrote my book. But we
yeah.
talk about it a lot more, and I think conversations
Mm,
open up when you start saying, this and this happened to me when I had my baby, or this and this happened. But the whole emotional and psychological part in particular,
mm,
we don't really talk about. It's almost like we just need to suck it up. And I feel like we've been denied the transition a little bit as mothers, that
yeah.
it's like, we need you, yeah, just suck it up. It's like, well, it's just old you now, but you've got a baby, and
Mm,
you know
yeah. Yeah.
and it's very
And that
sad.
expectation that women are given, that, you get pregnant, you have a baby, but you're still meant just to be you. I mean, it's can I I don't know, feel like swearing. It's like, it's crap. Like, it's
You
just,
can swear if you
it's not
want, I
true.
don't mind.
Can I take it? Um, like, we're setting women up with this false expectation of how they're going to feel and what it's going to be like. And so then when reality is different and they do have this massive shift within themselves when they become a mother, there is this big hole, this big gap in the middle, where they go, well, hang on, I was this person, now I'm this person, but I was brought up to believe I was still meant to be that old person, but I'm not, and I don't know what to do with it. And it creates so much angst and emotional distress for women,
Mm.
and it just doesn't need to be like that.
And feelings of failure, because
Yeah.
this is expectations set upon us as well.
Mm,
And we know now, studies have been done about how much changes physiologically, like even just because I'm a neuroscientist, from a brain
mm,
perspective of what happens to a
mhm,
woman's brain when she has a baby, to
mm,
expect us to actually be the same person at the end after that
mm,
experience. It's impossible.
mm, mm. And I think one of the beautiful perspectives that we can offer women is that instead of feeling like you've got to somehow try to go back to being who you were, and that's somehow our end goal, is to let go of that and say, you know what, I was who I was when I arrived in this space of motherhood, and now I've entered this space of motherhood, and it has opened me up to a whole bunch of new things, and it is transforming me and changing me and molding me. Instead of trying to go back to who I was, how about I just accept that I'm carrying forward with me
Mm.
many elements, many essences, many things that I hold dear. How about I just carry those forward and let them take new form and new shape in this new evolution of who I am, which includes motherhood? Yeah. And that
Absolutely.
just takes away this sense of battle to, go back to what I was before. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, just bring it forward, allow it to come with you, and that's
Yeah.
perfect.
And choose where you want to take it. You don't need to. I think a lot of the times we kind of just roll with the punches and just go, "Oh, well, this is what I've been given." That we
Mm,
forget we have a choice of where we want to take this new us. And I think it's interesting you said that because Rachel, who is a dietitian, and actually the podcast with her is coming out tomorrow, she was talking about the body and the struggle that we have with trying to go back to this figure
yeah.
and this body, and it's
Hmm.
like, but we are physically transformed.
Yeah.
You cannot go back. Your body will not be the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah.
And so I think that carries over very nicely, that emotionally and psychologically, mentally, we also just take the old and move forward, and everything is always moving forward.
Mm,
Nothing goes back. Every cell is rejuvenated. Everything,
mm.
we're always going forward. So to try and
Yeah.
hold on to the old is it's not going to work.
No, no, but we have been raised with a cultural mandate that has told us that's what we should do, right? And so this is where all this conflict is coming from, because we've carried this deep messaging from the world we live in, from our mothers, from their mothers, that this is how it's meant to be. And it's like,
Mm,
no, we need to start having a new dialogue around this. We need to start new messages,
mm.
because this is not working.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I was reading in one of your blogs, Linda's
Mhm.
got an amazing website, if you should go and check it out, about this idea of being, two different women in one body, and this like you were just saying, the stretching and the kind of
Mm.
wanting to be here but wanting to be there. And what do you, other than just sort of going with the flow, what do you think is sort of a good idea to implement for yourself if you are really, you do feel split in half?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You do literally feel like you were split down the middle, and there's one half that's gone into motherhood, and one half that's kind of, the old me version. And look, and I'm going to say, I still go through this, right? I still have days of my life where I yearn for parts of the old me and parts of my old way of living. So whether it be, I'm a real traveler, so I yearn for my little gypsy spirit to just jump on a plane and go somewhere and have an adventure. And I go, oh, can't really take 3 kids with me today. Okay, I won't. So for me, it was really important to recognize which of those elements, as I was saying before, were still really important to me. So for example, traveling, I identified for my husband and I that that was still a really important element of who we were as human beings. And so along the way, we've worked out, well, how can I bring that with me? How do I integrate that? Now, sometimes that might show up just as, um, in our local area, of saying, let's, we live on this beautiful island with beautiful hiking tracks, and I might get the hiking trail map out and go, let's go pick a track we've never gone to before.
Mm,
Instead of the ones we always do because they're our favorites, let's pick a different one and have a little exploration and a little adventure. Or it's, that we've taken our children to all sorts of amazing places around the world, because not for them really, to be honest,
no,
because we
yeah,
wanted to go, right? Because we wanted to still go and have all these
yeah.
experiences. But it's just, for me, it's just really about finding little ways to bring these elements into day to day so that you don't feel such a disconnect. It's not the
Mm,
same, so you've got to let go of, I want it to be the same, I want it to go back to how it was. It's really important to go, let that go. But then to say, but how do I bring this with me? How can I make that important in the way that we live our life as a family?
yeah. So I think I agree with you. I think bringing little elements of your old self, I guess in
Mm,
inverted commas,
mm,
into your new life. And like you said, you're
mm,
traveling, and that's important to you. And everyone just has to
mm.
find something that is important to them to bring into their new life, to juggle. Whether it's even a partner or a parent maybe taking the children so you can go and
Yeah,
do your sport or whatever it
yeah.
is that you need to do to bring that kind of balance back.
Mm.
I don't know if balance is the right word, actually.
No.
No.
But I think, and one of the things I talk to mums a lot about around that is then also to let go of this idea that the way you engage in whatever kind of interest or activity you want to do, is to let go of it being perfect. So, you know, if you love yoga and perfect yoga is to get to this 90-minute class on a Sunday morning every week, great. Sometimes you might do that, but other times, you know what, it might be 10 minutes of YouTube yoga in the garage, which is not perfect, but it's a whole lot better than not doing anything. And to accept
Absolutely.
that all these little, I'm a real fan of saying frequent connection points, small connection points, but often will serve you better than holding out for the ultimate way of expressing something. And that's
Yeah.
much better for kind of our well-being.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we're conditioned as human beings. We're hardwired to believe that if we don't see a big change or a big something, that
Yeah.
nothing is happening. And,
Yeah.
you know, like again, coming back to the cells, the rejuvenating of the cells and the stuff that happens in the body from, you know, just a second by second that is so minuscule that we can't even see it. And that brings about a massive change over time. So having the little by little by little to add to the well-being is really important. We just have to remember that.
Mm, mm.
Yeah. So I also just wanted to talk to you. We haven't actually mentioned the word matrescence yet.
M word. Yeah.
Matrescence.
Yeah.
You discovered this
Mm.
word a lot later in your motherhood journey as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I sort of just wanted to go down that route a little bit to, I guess, discuss why we don't talk about it, and what we can do to bring it to the surface, to let other mothers know so that they can learn about the actual word and, you know, what it brings
Mm.
about before they have their baby.
Yeah. So what was really interesting for me was that, yeah, so I came across this word matrescence maybe 2 years ago. And all the kind of years leading up to that, when I talked about, you know, that I transitioned working to mothers and to hold these spaces and have these conversations, I kind of went, well, hang on, I've kind of been in this space. I just didn't know it was a thing, right? I didn't know that there was a word that described the whole transition, the whole process, the whole sort of framework around it. And so I was so excited to discover that there was, you know, an actual dialogue and framework happening in the world that would give women a context to kind of hang all their experiences in, a bit like you know, literally a frame, and you sort of say, well, I'm experiencing this, or that hangs on this part of my chart or this part of the framework. So I found that really exciting, and, you know, to now be able to deepen the conversations I have with women in this way is really good. And so I think that being able to firstly just give a word to women that matrescence equals this transition, that in itself is so powerful, because they just get to say, oh, it's not just me, like
Yeah,
it's a real thing. You know, that is super powerful. And then
absolutely.
being able to offer women language around all the different parts of experiences and process they might be having is so healing, I think. You know, it just, yeah, it just gives them a point of reference. It helps them anchor into something and not feel that they lost their way, that actually they didn't lose their way. They're exactly as they need to be, and here is why, and here is what it is, and here is how it's showing up. So yeah,
Yeah,
but I
yeah,
think,
I
you know,
so
you said,
agree.
why are we not talking about it? It's like, well, we're not talking about it because really, I mean, for you and I, this is a really normal thing to talk about. But, you know, as you know, give me a room full of 20 mothers and, you know, 18 of them will say, what's that word? You know, it's not user friendly yet in our world. It's not something people go, oh yeah, that, yeah, I know about that.
Yeah,
I read about that. Someone told me about that.
yeah.
And it needs to be.
Yeah, and also this is my experience of it, because all the experiences are different because of our, you know,
Mm-hmm.
makeup and where we've come from. And yeah, I agree. I think that it needs to become a common word, and it needs to be something that women are ready for. Like, you know, we often talk about the similarities with it being to adolescence, and how
Mm-hmm.
everybody knows that at a certain stage in your life you will go through adolescence, and for boys it means this, and for girls it means that, and approximately how long it lasts, and blah 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 blah. But with when it comes to matrescence, we don't, I mean, we don't even know the words. So I was like exactly like what you just described when I learnt about matrescence, because my when I had my third baby, I sort of had, I'd call it a postnatal breakdown, because nobody ever, like with you, nobody ever actually said postnatal depression or postnatal anxiety, or I don't know what it was. It was just some sort of breakdown. But in hindsight, I realized it was just matrescence, and my sheer will to hold on to the old life, and that
Yeah.
resistance that made it so extreme. That's what made it so
Mm.
extreme. So when
Mm.
I heard about it, it was like my shoulders went down. I breathed a sigh of relief, and I just went, oh, that's what's, inverted commas, wrong with me. When
Yeah.
it's nothing is wrong with me. It's completely normal.
Mm.
And it was like
And
a gift.
yeah. And so, when you think of that experience and you think, well, what might have been different in your world and your experience if
Oh,
in the lead up to having your third baby, you had this knowledge and this awareness, and that you had people around you ready to support and honor this transition,
yes.
and that they were not leaving it be because it's your third baby and surely you've gone through all this before. It's like, no. Every baby brings with it a new level of
Mm,
opening and transition and change. It's not just the first time.
yes,
And so how
absolutely.
how different might it have been for you if that had all been around you at that time? Yeah.
I think for me personally, and I wonder if other women can relate to this as well. I would have just been more fluid. I would have flowed through it a lot more. I mean, my third baby was she had extreme reflux, and she had very bad ears, so she didn't sleep much. And I think a lot of it was for me was due to sleep deprivation, but also this holding on to, I have had two kids, I've done this before, I can do this, and
Yeah.
and that's kind of what it was. So if someone had said, no, this is matrescence, this is really quite
Mm.
normal, I wonder whether I would have just glided a little
Gone
bit
on.
more through the
Yeah.
emotions and through the feelings and through the days.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. And just like your experience with every child is different, it's really important to note that, as you said, the way that matrescence shows up is different. We each have our own quite unique experience of it and an expression of it. And so I
Mm,
think that the more that we're able to share and talk about it, that we get to both see similarities in other people's journeys and stories and have that sense of connection, but to also honor that it's not a cookie cutter. It's not like, well,
mm,
it's this
mm,
and then
mm.
it's this and then it's this and then it's this and then we're done. It's all neat and tidy. It's like, no,
Like
it can
adolescence.
yeah, exactly, like
Yeah, yeah.
adolescence. So there are key markers. So speaking about girls, because I've got three girls, like, right,
Mm,
key markers are, you're going to go breasts and hips and more hair and get a period, and these things will all happen, but at
yeah.
different times. So there's a difference. But then within that, there are all these other, especially the emotional elements. It's like, well, how on earth do we know how that one's going to unfold? And for some it's quite easy, others it's really tumultuous
Mm,
and hormonal and angst ridden and everything in between. And yet it's all adolescence. It's all just part of the
mm,
normal journey. The same
yeah.
for women and matrescence. Yeah.
And I think what you said about matrescence, it being like a frame that you can hang things into, if you could just imagine it as like an umbrella term, and whatever happens under that umbrella is your
Mm-hmm.
experience. And I mean, I know, I work a lot with neuroplasticity, and I know that each brain is shaped differently according to our experiences and our actions. So none of us, we're snowflakes, we're all snowflakes. None of us have had the same life, the same
Yeah.
experience, the same actions, the same feelings about certain things. And so I think to have this umbrella term, which is loose enough to incorporate and encompass and hold every woman, but
Mm.
strong enough to give us something to hold on to, is just, it's so brilliant.
Yeah. Mm.
We need to get it out there, Linda.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yes,
our
we
job.
do.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I was just wondering if there's some women listening now who are pregnant who are going, "Oh my God, what is about to come? what is this? I want out. I don't
La
want
la
to do
la
this
la
anymore." Yeah, exactly.
la.
What would you recommend how they best prepare themselves?
That's a really good question. I think that what I would say is a lot of this in many ways means nothing until you're in it, right? It's like, I mean, and it's like having the baby. It's like until you've got the baby and you either have to have childbirth or you have to breastfeed, or all those things that you've learned about and talked about and read all the books about, really, until you're doing it, it actually doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So in some ways, matrescence is the same. Until you are having your own experience, it doesn't sink in. But the more you can arm yourself with story, I think, for me, stories, like imagine if every woman who was going to become a mother and was going to have a baby got to sit in circle with women who've had babies and just got to ask questions and got to say, I've heard about this thing called matrescence. I've heard that sometimes, you grieve who you were. Is that real? What was that like for you? And just to be part of the storytelling and hearing, so that when she arrives in her own space, she goes, oh, okay, that's what that was about. And here is how I'm feeling. And now I have this circle of women I could turn to and say, I'm feeling this, or I'm thinking this, or I've been wondering about this. Did you? Imagine if we could just have that dialogue in the same way that we go to mothers groups and people say, oh, I'm having trouble getting my baby to latch on. What do you do? Yeah, like, so we do all those things. So yeah, I mean, so I would just encourage any woman who is pregnant and embarking on this to just have a sense of curiosity, perhaps, about what matrescence might be for them, and not to be scared of it. Like we all talk about it, like, oh my God, but that's because we didn't know, right? So we had this sense of shock of, oh my God, what just happened to me? Because nobody told us it was coming. Yeah. And so my wish is now that women go, oh, I'm going to change. I'm going to have this kind of internal opening and evolving and turning into the butterfly experience, and have a sense of curiosity about it, and just know who you feel connected to that you can have these conversations with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think creating a solid support network of women that you can trust is really important, so that you can ask a question, that you can say, I'm experiencing XYZ. Have you ever experienced that before? Or, asking questions out of your curiosity, and women being willing to answer them honestly. So I think that it kind of rests with all mothers to be available to women to answer questions that they might have. And yeah, I think that's really good advice. I think the curiosity is a really brilliant thing. And I think just to remember that whatever happens, it's normal, and that it's okay, that it's okay.
All okay. Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with you. And I know that some women that I've spoken to panic a little bit to say, oh, maybe someone will take away my child because I'm not coping, or like all these sort of weird things that we tell ourselves during our postnatal period. Just remember that it's okay. And if you go to a doctor and you need some help and they say, I don't know what you're talking about, you need to find someone else.
Yeah, exactly.
Or a
Yeah, you need to
like
find,
in your experience, you need to find someone you connect with who understands and speaks the same language.
yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I shared with you a story of after my second child having depression of some form, whatever label got put on it at the time, and the first psychologist I was sent to, just like there was total disconnect, and she sort of like talked at me, and it was awful. And I remember her finishing the session and saying, all right, so I'll see you in 2 hours. And I'm sitting there going, you're never going to see me again. Like, that was the worst thing ever. You're not going to help me. And I needed to find someone who heard me, who really heard what I needed to say, and I could relate to. And so it's the same. I mean, it's the same with all parts of our motherhood journey, whether it be about the baby related learning or the learnings within ourselves, that you need to find your tribe. You need to find the people that hold space for you and you feel really comfortable with. And they might not be face to face, they might be online, they might be friends, they might be strangers. It doesn't really matter who they are, as long as you feel that you're connected. And to come and listen to things like this and hear women saying, it's all okay. What you're feeling is normal.
Yeah.
You know, you haven't failed. There's nothing wrong with you. You are still, you know, a brilliant, amazing woman, no matter what you're going through.
Oh, I love that. I think that's a really wonderful place to end our
Mm.
conversation. Um, I would love to just, before we leave, hear a little bit more about your work
Mm-hmm.
that you do with women, and perhaps you just want to, yeah, explain. So if anyone who's listening like to work with you, they can
Mm-hmm.
find you. I'll put your link to your website and your socials in the show notes so they can find you through
Okay.
that way. But if you'd just like to explain a little bit more about your work, that'd be wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I work with women in a range of different ways, everything from, you know, one-on-one coaching with them. I run some group programs. Some of them are like group coaching programs where women just come into this virtual space with me every fortnight and get to just share whatever they need some support with, and we work as a group like that. You know, I'm currently running something called the Mama Rising Book Club, which is, so Mama Rising is a book that talks also about matrescence by Amy Taylor Kabaz, and we're actually, you know, we're pulling apart chapter by chapter what this means to these women in the group, and doing things like that. So there's a whole range of kind of different ways that I dive in and do things like that. So look, yeah, I mean, if anyone has any questions or would just like to reach out and say, you know, I'm really curious about this, can I learn more about this? You know, I'm very friendly. You can just
Yes, you
send me an
are.
email, you
You're
know,
very friendly. And
you
I
know,
love that you've got all
beautiful.
these different avenues for women to reach out as
Yeah.
well, because like, you know, we're all so different. We like certain things in
Like to
different
learn in
ways.
different ways, you know, or
That's right.
come and read some blog posts, or come and download an ebook. Like there's all, you know, it's different. People are ready for different things at different times of their journey, and
Mm,
I think it's what's really important to me, and I know it's very similar for you, is to just make sure there are all these different touch points, so that if it's 3 a.m. in the middle of the night and yep, I'm not going to answer a phone, someone can still come and find
yeah.
something to feel connected to and say, oh yeah, it's
Yeah,
okay, you know, that's
absolutely.
there. So
And
mm,
yeah, and just not knowing that you're not alone. You're not alone in your experience. You're not alone in your journey. There are
no.
plenty of mothers out there, and there's a lot of support out there.
Yeah. And so that, you know, if anyone is listening to this and is thinking, you know, I am struggling right now, I am having a hard time, is to say, don't silence it, don't hold it in, don't try and hide it from the world. We don't all have to show up and be shiny and happy all the time. It's okay to come to someone and say, I am finding this really hard right now, you
Mm,
know, and it's
mm,
just, it's so important to be able to do that.
absolutely. Well, thank you, Linda. It's been so lovely to chat to
Mm.
you.
Thank you for
And
having me.
I would love to have you on again another time. I think we could just talk about this for hours.
Sure.
um,
Yeah.
and yeah, and so I'll put your all your links in your show notes in the
Mm,
show notes. And thank you very much for your time and your insight and your
mm.
love and support.
Always, anytime. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.